the best way to do a debate is to completely understand the other side's position.
Yeah.
Understand it as good or better than they understand it.
He
And so
understands. He
I've
doesn't
read-
understand his own positions. How can he understand theirs?
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Back to the subject of capitalism. Capitalism and Marxism and socialism. This right
Marxism.
now, we're in a wave of this, right? It's become more popular now.
Does anybody know how to define Marxism? Because I hear that a lot. Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization. As if Marx ever even thought of something that said Black Lives Matter.
I would say over the last, particularly during the Trump administrations, the concept of socialism at least has become more publicly discussed than any time that I can remember in my life. Why do you think that is?
When they say socialism and capitalism, I think it's important to frame it in a better way because, I'm all about labeling and what sells good. So instead of socialism, it should be CEO of Whole Foods defends capitalism versus worker rights, because socialism, all that means in this context is workers' rights and workers' power and people power in democracy.
I think it's because the generation that's coming up you have to understand the academic community is I always say the intellectuals have always been the enemy of business, enemy of capitalism.
The intellectuals have always been an enemy of capitalism.
But why is that?
I think because
the people who study capitalism
in a market
don't
society, which has been rare in history, we haven't mostly had market societies, but they're not very important in a market society.
The intellectuals aren't very important?
Generally not as important, no.
But aren't they
Literally, all the people spurring innovation are intellectuals. At every college campus, anybody that goes into engineering, that goes into computer science, they're making all the new iPhones and all the rockets. Like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and all these people aren't actually making anything. They're hiring people to make stuff. They're businessmen who are glorified in the public eye.
Ones that inspire the minds of the people that create and maybe innovate in the industry?
They don't have the same social status that the entrepreneurs have. An Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos.
So you think it's an ego issue? The social status issue?
Think about it this way. If you're going to school, okay, and the people that end up teaching in the universities were always the smartest kids in the school generally, and they did well in school. I mean, smart in terms of doing well in school. And they go on to college, and then they go and get a PhD, and then they that's all they've known is school. That's been their universe, right? And they excelled at it. And they were smarter than the other kids in school.
All they've done is learn. And he's going to say, oh, they were really good in school, and they learned a lot reading their silly books. But when it came to the real world...
And now these other kids, they go to college, and they get a degree in business, and they're in a fraternity, and they make a lot of friends and relationships, and they make more money than the intellectuals do. And that seems like that's completely unfair.
You worked at Whole Foods. This is probably one of the worst companies to work for. They've, for their entire existence, they have sold products that were made from prison labor, and you know how expensive they are. This guy's hilarious.
It's an unjust world that
how expensive they sell
less
it for.
Smart people are making more money than the smart people do, and they have more status in the society. And I think that's underlying it is a resentment or an envy.
Wait,
of a
is
society
he saying that intellectuals simply don't like the current system because they're jealous of people who do have money? It's like that argument oh, when you're older and when you actually have money, then you're going to be more conservative. Because then you'll understand the real world. You're just jealous of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk for being such supreme chads.
It doesn't judge them to be as important as they judge themselves.
That's interesting, but I think it's a very flawed perspective. And first of all, the term smart is a weird term.
I said smart in terms of school. I didn't say in terms of street smarts or ability to do things, to connect with people. There's emotional intelligence. I'm merely saying they're good at
the ability to connect with people and make deals is one thing, the business class or whatever. they're good at that. They're good at making connections, and they're good at using like social capital. They're not really smart people. They're not really financially literate people, but they are people who know how to, like, Trump's art of the deal is all manipulation tactics. It's all using your influence to crush other people. And of course, most of these people start off with money that put them, you know, in a privileged position over the people who they manipulate and over the workers that they use to, you know, grow their companies and all that.
Taking tests, writing papers, abstracting thoughts, essentially.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. That, just the term smart, it's almost like, the problem is it's like a blanket term, right? It's like drugs. You know, like it applies to a bunch of different things that don't necessarily seem to be related. But the people that are interested in that, pursue that. The fact that they can't understand that there's an like Elon Musk is a great example. If you don't think Elon Musk is intelligent, you're either you're
not very intelligent yourself if
Yeah.
you don't think Elon Musk is intelligent.
you're delusional, or you're a liar, or you're in
He's
denial.
manipulative. Yeah, he could manipulate people. He can use social capital. He's a businessman. He's not any type of smart deity. He's not an engineer. He doesn't know how to make rockets. He's not a part of NASA.
Right. It's one of those things. There's something wrong with the way you think.
He's not
He's
building the
clearly
Tesla
intelligent.
cars.
But there's people that call him a fool.
You
And
could
that,
say
like,
he's
the
smart by knowing where to like invest money, I guess.
guy's running like 4 different businesses simultaneously.
I
They're
had
all
that much money,
successful.
it would
and
be
he's
pretty
innovating with when it comes to
grow
space
a
travel
business.
in a way that you would assume that someone have to.
Once you have money, you exponentially make so much more money off of that money. So if you start off with money, you're going to grow more. If you hand me $10 million right now, I can turn that into $100 million pretty
dedicate
easily
most of their life
over a couple
just
years.
singularly to that task, to be able to figure out past NASA how to shoot a rocket up into space and have it land,
Right.
and then reuse it. No one's been able to do that besides him, or up until he did it.
didn't
And
do
I think
that, though. He didn't make that
Jeff
that
Bezos'
stuff.
company is
He
doing the
didn't-
same thing
Yeah.
too now.
It's
Blue
not them
Origin.
doing
Yeah.
it.
They're obviously two
It's
of the
the
great
workers.
entrepreneurs of
Yeah.
this particular era.
But I don't think Jeff Bezos is actually engineering these things.
But if you think about it, the intellectuals have always disliked business. They've always discriminated against the merchant classes, the Jews in the West, Chinese in the East. There's really been no historical
merchant
period where
classes.
intellectuals praised business. Maybe a little bit around the time of
Is it mercantilism, merchantilism, or whatever? That form of like markets or whatever. It wasn't markets. It was like people had deals with different like kingdoms and stuff, right? That's how it worked. That's why Adam Smith said you needed free markets. It wasn't a response to socialism. So Adam Smith wasn't advocating against socialism. He was advocating against corrupt government that ruined free markets. So like talking about the merchant class, being against them is being against people who are able to manipulate the flow of currency and manipulate the current economic system. Like, of course you're going to be against those people because they cripple the rest of society and they ruin innovation. They don't spur innovation. They actually hold a society back from what it can be.
Adam Smith.
Because their only
up
interests
until
are
probably
their own.
Ricardo and Malthus wrote in the early 19th century. For the most part, business people have been seen, they're disruptive. They change things. They upset the status quo. They innovate. Well, a lot of people don't like innovations. It's threatening. It changes social status. It changes
like
wealth,
innovation.
relationships. That it's almost like capitalism is like a genie that got out of the bottle.
They don't like innovation that only benefits like two people in the society. They don't like a system where some people are lords that rule over all of us. Because what we're living in right now is essentially neo-feudalism. There's nothing different from what it was back in the day with like the serfs and the peasants and plebs or whatever.
And they're trying very hard to
for that
stuff
era.
the genie back in the bottle as much as they can. And I think if you think about it that way, you'll understand we're never going to win the intellectuals over. I mean, I speak in universities all the time, and the students, I'm an entrepreneur, I self-identify that way. Students love when I talk about conscious capitalism. Because I say, you can do good and you can do well. There's no contradiction here. You're the good guys here. You're not the
Do you
bad
debate
guys.
people about this?
I do. I've debated a number of socialists.
And what is their primary argument?
Their primary argument is that business is greedy and selfish, and it's about motivations. That they
No. The argument is that businesses, and capitalists will tell you this too, businesses are amoral. So they operate based off their incentives. If businesses are incentivized to hurt workers' rights, to hurt people, and to exploit, to price gouge, if they're incentivized to do that, they are going to do that. The job of fixing capitalism for people who want to do that is to make incentives work in a way that when the corporations act within the system, it benefits people. That's what people who want to reform capitalism, like Andrew Yang, want it to be. When he says human-centered capitalism, he doesn't want to remove capitalism. He wants to change the incentives of capitalism and move the incentives away from stuff that actively hurts people.
That business people have the wrong motivations. In a lot of ways, conscious capitalism is an answer to that. It's a complete answer to that, because in the book and in Conscious Leadership as well, we're basically arguing that business isn't primarily about maximizing profits. Business is primarily about creating value for other people.
No.
And through
it's
creating value
about maximizing your own profit. Capitalists will tell you individual companies want to maximize their own profit. That's the argument that they're going to innovate more, because they're going to innovate more because if they do innovate, it's going to maximize their profit. If we're going to be saved from climate change, they'll tell you a company is going to want to innovate to fix climate change because they can make a lot of profit from it. If they are, the argument for private healthcare is that companies are going to innovate to get people coverage and to create better treatments because they'll be making more money. And the externalities of that, what capitalists say, the externalities are going to benefit us. No capitalist seriously says that they think the idea, the role and the interest of corporations is to make life better for everybody.
For other people, you do make a profit, but it's the value creation that comes first.
No.
The profits come second in exchange, right? And it's almost, if you are creating value, then you are profitable. And then you can reinvest those profits, and you have this upwards spiral. So that. Business has this potential for higher purpose. It's not primarily about greed. Greed is found in human nature, Joe. It's not just found in business people. There are plenty of greedy governmental officials, plenty of greedy politicians.
The greedy governmental officials are taking money from companies whose profits are maximized by buying out politicians. That's capitalism.
Greedy lawyers. Greed is endemic to human nature.
In
business
any
people
system,
either have no more or no less than it.
That's
It's
directly
just part
correlated
of who
with
we are.
capitalism.
Has anyone ever laid it out in a way that's very compelling? Like when you have these debates with socialists and has anyone ever laid it out in a way where they have a point where you see their point?
The best way to do a debate is to completely understand the other side's position.
Yeah.
Understand it as good or better than they understand it.
He
And so
understands. He doesn't
I've read
understand his own positions. How can he understand theirs?
widely in socialistic literature. I think I do understand it. It's a type of utopianism. It's an
type
attempt to
of
change human nature. If we would all be
What
if we
is
would
socialism? It's when the government does stuff and they try to change human nature
all
away
love
from our
each other,
natural bloodline.
and if we'd all share equally, then the world would be a better place. And hey, guess what?
It's that meme about if you have a birthday cake, socialism is like birthday cake. You have to share it with everybody. That's what socialism means.
Probably would be if we were naturally that way, but we're not naturally that way. We look first generally for ourselves and our own families, and then our growing circle of relationships that we develop. It's natural to want your own children to have advantages. That's just human nature, to want your children to flourish because you raise them, you love them.
90% of the families I know would benefit from worker ownership because their parents would make more money if there were things like unions. Their parents would make more money, and they would be able to pass more money down to their kids and give their kids a better opportunity at life and at education. Like literally the entire Rust Belt would be improved by what these crazy socialists want to do.
And somehow or another to say that's unfair is cutting against human nature. People are always going to look for advantages or privileges, so to speak, for their children.
Yeah, people don't like when people have advantages and have victories, because then someone has to lose. And when someone loses, they equate that someone losing with a bad feeling.
There is no winning or losing in this system. They're starting ahead or they're starting behind. And then there's exceptions for people who can do, what's not normal, which is someone going from poor to rich or rich to poor. because we have low social mobility in the US. Even from like this, this what's it called? This entrepreneur bro mindset of you have to compete to win, and those who do compete should win. This system doesn't make sense because people aren't rewarded for what they do. It's not a meritocracy. We're nowhere near a meritocracy. Not until everybody starts off at nearly the same place. If you even want to make the argument that capitalism works as like there's a good study actually on how if you're a high school athlete like I was, you're more likely to think capitalism is fair because you think capitalism works like a sport where if you work out more, you're going to win. When in reality, there's a lot more variables at play: natural ability, your family's background, referees, coaching, things like that. Those are all different variables, but people who play sports in high school think, oh, if I'm successful, I worked for it. If you're not successful, you didn't work for it. And they think that applies to real life, and therefore, they think the capitalist propaganda is true. If you worked hard, you made it. If you made it, you obviously worked hard. And if you didn't make it, you obviously didn't work hard.
Person being victimized, like there's some.
All right, so here's a big idea we talk about in conscious leadership. We have a chapter called Find Win-Win-Win Solutions. The metaphors that we use to think about society tend to be very binary: good versus evil, light versus darkness, win versus lose. And so they tend to think of business as a win-lose game. Somebody wins and somebody else is losing. But the beauty of capitalism is it's a win-win-win game. It's an infinite game. It's a game because the customers are winning or they wouldn't trade. The employees are winning.
Customers are winning or they wouldn't trade. The customers have no choice but to trade because the Walmart and the Walgreens and the giant superstores are the only places they can get food from. They are forced to trade. You can't make the argument that food and necessities like healthcare are commodities. You're not voluntarily being a part of that system. You're not benefiting from that. Like it's like saying if you have like a slave owner saying in like 1850, it's a win-win situation for all of us because if I wasn't here owning the slaves and feeding them to make sure they're still alive, they would obviously die. Therefore, it's a win-win situation for both of us.
The customer's winning. They're getting products and services and there's competition to make those services and products better.
No, he works for. This is the Whole Food CEO. That's not how groceries work. That's not how food works. Any actual even a first-year freshman in an econ major would laugh at this guy probably.
The employees are winning because they have jobs and opportunities to grow.
Jobs and opportunities at Walgreens. Erica, you said you worked at Walgreens. What kind of jobs and opportunities? Well, you had a job, I guess. But what kind of opportunities did they provide to you?
Benefits are paid, and they do that voluntarily. They're not forced to work for any particular company. They do it because they think it's in their best interest.
They are forced to get to work for these companies. They don't work for these companies for their best interest. It's the only option. Like if you're in a town and all there is like hardware stores, Walmart, Turkey Hill's a gas station up here in the northeast U.S. If there's gas stations and all that stuff, they all pay the same price. You're not making a decision on what to or like who to work for. Like you literally have no options.
For the employees. The suppliers who are trading with the business, they're winning as well, or they wouldn't make the exchanges. Investors
if you're a supplier, your only option to sell products now is through Walmart or Amazon, who buys really cheap and sells really high. And they use their monopoly economy of scale in order to sell products cheaper to drive all other distributors out. Amazon and Walmart, all they do is distribute. They facilitate the transaction between us and the suppliers. Without Amazon and Walmart, with a more delegated system, suppliers would be better off because they would have more companies to choose from. Therefore, they would have more competition between the different companies. Like if you had Walmart, Amazon, and you had like 10 other companies that could distribute and orchestrate this transaction, the suppliers would be better off in that situation as well.
winning, or they wouldn't make the
This guy
investments.
doesn't understand
And
capitalism
the
at
larger
all.
society is winning because business is the engine that creates all the money that goes into nonprofits and governments. Without business, there is no government, and there is no.
Without business, there is no government. Government has always existed with or without business. And the old argument, like, if businesses didn't produce money, therefore you wouldn't be able to fund government. That's not how that exactly works. I hear that argument a lot. Like, if we didn't have capitalism right now, then we wouldn't have enough money to spur medical innovation, and we wouldn't have enough money to go into space and all this stuff. But hey, smoking weed's okay? No, smoking weed is dangerous. More dangerous than heroin, by the way.
Nonprofit sector, because those are ultimately supplied
recognized
through
by the federal
what
government.
business creates. So business is a win-win-win game. All of these stakeholders are winning, and that's why capitalism lifts society up. Socialism is an attempt to reverse that back to a win-lose game, and that's why it always fails. And that's why capitalism
How is it
always
an
wins.
attempt to bring it back to a win-lose game? In what way?
The ones that are winning, so to speak, the business people are clamped down, so they're not allowed to win. It's like, we're going to take your success and we're going to redistribute it.
So if you're Jeff Bezos and you own more wealth than 250 million Americans combined, 250 million, firefighters, police officers, doctors, janitors, teachers, all these people combined, you're simply winning. And all those other people are simply losing. And if the 250 million people say, hey, Jeff Bezos, you own the entire country, can we please use some of your wealth to help the common folk? Apparently they are just sore losers, right? That's how society operates, just win-lose. Socialists want to say that billionaires are evil and, say their success is invalid and redistribute their success. Although their success is built off of their workers and society, even at the most basic level, for a person who's very capitalistic, the argument like if you benefit from this system, you should pay back into that same system so other people have a chance to be successful too. Even that argument works for people because 99% of people, they know this argument that this guy is giving is bullshit.
So that, again, you said earlier on, incentives matter, but we're going to take.
I'm being sarcastic because the U.S. is stupid, and they're like heroin and weed are on the same level with the freaking federal drug classifications.
Away the incentives for business to really flourish and succeed. They should do it from altruistic reasons.
$35 an hour in San Francisco, and $50 is
And we may do some things for altruistic reasons, but you cannot build a society around it.
When you're talking about win-win-win, this is in many ways, I see what you're saying, but there are things that are negative that are associated with profit and innovation and particularly expanding industry, right? Particularly environmental impacts. Like when you say win-win-win, like there's very rarely especially when you're dealing with creating and designing and building things, you've got a negative impact in some way environmentally.
Two points. First of all, historically, socialism's been far worse polluter than capitalistic countries. Well, if you just look at the environmental destruction that the Soviet Union left behind it, it was a complete disaster.
The Soviet Union was socialism. Oh my God, I wish. You know how much better the world would be if the USSR never happened, just because they couldn't bring that up as an argument.
This is socialism done wrong, John. We're going to do it right here.
Who has done it right, Joe? No one's done it right.
But the Soviet Union is a bad example.
No,
Stalin was.
Yeah, but all of Eastern
it is
Europe.
A bad example.
There's no incentive
Western
to protect the common good in socialism.
What? There's no incentive
don't.
to protect the common good in capitalism. That's literally like a key feature. Profit above all else.
When the government has a monopoly of all decisions.
There's a reason whenever we come together to say, hey, companies, stop burning down the rainforests. There's a reason they call that movement socialist. When socialists were fighting for weekends and a minimum wage and social security, there's a reason they called that socialist. Literally just because it was, going to harm their interests.
In power making, they don't tend to look out for the environment. That's one of the myths.
You also take away agency from people, and you take away their desire to improve and do better. And without incentive, people just don't perform the same way.
But the beautiful thing about business, let's concede a partial truth to what you said, that there will be unintended negative consequences, as you say, environmentally. Well, that's why you have to regulate business to a certain extent. That's why you have to
I thought he wasn't for regulation of any kind.
People responsible for their environmental pollutants.
So is he for regulating businesses so they don't pollute the environment? Guarantee he would call that a big socialist Marxist takeover.
Because business innovates and has an incentive to innovate, business can innovate and create solutions to those environmental problems.
Okay, let me stop you there for a second. When you say make people responsible for their environmental pollutants, then we're going to have to deal with another aspect of capitalism, and that's the effect that special interest groups and lobbyists have on politicians, because they create laws that shield these big businesses from consequences from these negative actions. So by saying that they have to clean up their problem, the only way that's ever going to happen is if they're not protected, if they don't use that influence and money.
Totally agree.
So this is where I think a lot of people have a valid argument against capitalism. Capitalism has kind of fucked over our system of government in a way, because money has gotten so deeply involved with super PACs and lobbyists, and there's so much money involved that it changes the way we govern things.
Wow. Why are only socialists or people on the far left of America, like AOC and stuff, why are they the only ones who are calling to get money out of politics? Really weird, right?
Is that a flaw of capitalism or is that a flaw of government?
I think it's a flaw of government, but that government has been...
two different things. Government can be socialist, it can be capitalist, it can be a mixed economy. There's a whole gradient of what it can be. Government doesn't mean one thing or another. It literally just means an organization, like...
influenced by capitalism. By capitalism's desire for universal growth, for constant growth.
The sad truth is that humanity is not perfectible. We can never create the perfect system.
They're trying to make it perfect. They're trying to democratize things and make things better for regular people, like redistribute wealth.
Attempt to create the perfect system. The perfect is the enemy of the good.
Right.
Capitalism is not perfect. It does not, because human choice.
Next, what was that term? This is basically that one speech about how the world can never get better. Be happy how you are now, peasants. If you overthrow capitalism, we will burn the whole system to the ground. Which, by the way, is pretty true. Like, I bring this example up a lot. In, like, Italy with Mussolini, when there was about to be, like, a socialist revolution, the capital owners of that society made sure that it was a fascist right-wing revolution because, you know, socialism and fascism are both revolutionary ideologies, and whenever a society is about to collapse to a populist-like rule, the capital owners will always pick fascism because they can survive and keep on profiting within fascism. A socialist takeover, oh no, they'll never do that. They'll never, you know, give power up to the workers. They would rather see the system crash and, you know, take the system down with them than to let the system maintain and be owned by people.
Choices and what people want varies. Capitalism will sell cigarettes to people because that's what people want. It gives them pleasure, but it's bad for their health. But they're giving people what they want. It's the same thing in any type of externality. That's not deliberately done to harm the society. It's sort of a byproduct.
Right, but this is why win-win-win doesn't really work. It's not really win-win-win. It's win most of the time, but with some negative consequences that are better than the alternative, right?
But what you strive for is to take those externalities or those negative consequences and try to, through good government, to minimize them or lessen them. I'll give you an example. So you used to live in L.A. Well, when I went to L.A. back in the early 80s, it was like going to New Delhi today. I couldn't see. My lungs hurt less than 24 hours.
Right.
But through good regulations, the air in L.A. is a fraction as polluted as it was.
So he's for regulations.
40 years ago. We've been able to clean it up. That is an example of how you can take the worst impacts of industrialization and ameliorate them or lessen them.
Dumb.
New
Is that
fresh.
it? He's on here with a couple other profound statements. Let's see. What does it take to build a company? What does it take?
Message, is this something that you have sort
The Joe Rogan Experience.
This message, is this something that you have sort of developed over the years of arguing with people about it?
No, it's
Yeah,
mostly
that's funny.
from.
They polluted the entire world and created a toxic smog. And they're like, give us a pat on the back when they finally fix it. When, they need to before society collapses.
What we did at Whole Foods, because I had no background in business, right? I'm an entrepreneur.
You guys started
tell.
here, right?
In Austin. That's right. I first store here over 42 years ago now.
Jesus, you look great. How old are you?
67.
You look very good.
Well,
Fake
thank
hair.
you,
Tell you
Tom.
right now.
See, look,
You're
win-win-win.
holding up
We're a
well.
win-win relationship.
You're eating
here.
all that Whole Foods foods.
I'm eating all that healthy Whole Foods.
That is one thing that you guys did do that's very interesting, right? You created a market where, like, if you tell people I go to Whole Foods, people are like, oh, well, you care about your health.
It's pretentious.
It's synonymous with healthy foods, even in the name.
Yeah,
Whole Foods.
They treat
That
their
was-
workers bad. They sell products that are actually manufactured and produced by, slaves. But yeah, prison labor.
It's our brand when we were up and comer, and then when we got really rich. America loves the up and comer, but then once you have become really successful and you're making a lot of money, they start to turn on you.
Oh,
They love
no.
underdogs until those, and he probably wasn't an underdog. I'd have to look up his upbringing. But, people love underdogs, except when they own the entire world, when they own the entire country, and they prevent progress and lead us to our inevitable collapse. Then Americans don't like you for some reason. I don't get it. Just something about it.
Well, we became Whole Paycheck.
Who said that?
I don't know, but whoever did, I wish they.
I never saw it. I never saw that until right now. You just shit on yourself in a way that I never. All I heard was Whole Foods. I never heard Whole Paycheck.
Then your team didn't do good research.
I have no team. So is this when you sold to Amazon?
No, the Whole Paycheck thing's been around for a long time.
Oh yeah, Amazon.
Oh, because
I
Whole
forgot.
Paycheck meaning because it's so expensive.
Yes, because initially when we were up and comer, if you shopped at Whole Foods, you were showing everybody you were with it.
Environmentally conscious
Yes, and you
and-
were hip and cool. Right. And then the narrative went sour because it's like you're a fool for shopping there because you can get the same food cheaper elsewhere. So you're going to Whole Paycheck. So the narrative turned negative, so to speak. I still see that pretty much all the time, although since our merger with Amazon, we've cut our prices many, many times.
How'd you do that?
Amazon allowed Whole Foods to think long term again. We needed to cut our prices, but when you're public,
Well, those technically are socialist systems. Anything like decommodified and owned by people and owned through democracy is a socialist system, right? But if you talk about being a full socialist, that means you're thinking about a system beyond capitalism, and you believe that the world can move to a place of, full community and like commune styled living and like workplace democracy. I'm not that far. I think we need to decommodify certain things that cannot be commodities, like healthcare, like, housing, like for-profit prisons. Those things need to be completely decommodified, and then we'll get to the other stuff. I just don't concern myself going deeper. I don't see any use in it.